notes. Okay, so go over those notes. All right, so the first thing that I want to talk about is understanding CrossFit. And we're going to start throwing that word around because we are now a CrossFit gym. When I can officially announce that, all that fun stuff, right? And the other thing is all of this information is, when you take like a level 1 course, you'll get a lot of practical application, but you'll also get, you'll also be pretty well prepared for the test, right? Because most of the time when you take a test, you're freaked out because it's information that you're not familiar with, right? Or you've just recently been familiar with and you're afraid you're going to forget it. Here, we're embedding that information into how we coach, right? You're going to find yourself, talking about, core to extremity, right? You're going to find yourself talking about, this is a core strength and conditioning exercise. Things like load, distance, speed. They're going to kind of start to come natural to you. So that's why we're going to talk about them. Sound good? So the first thing is understanding CrossFit. What is the aim? Okay, the aim is a broad and general and inclusive fitness. Okay, so what does that mean? Basically, it will prepare yourself for, it prepares people that work in this capacity for basically any physical contingency, right? So the saying that we use a lot, and like I can use an example of like a workout. When you do a workout on your own, for example, when you and Mark are away, right? You do a workout on your own. It's probably going to be different than when it comes in here. When you come in here and do it, right? So you can read a workout on the board, but it's a whole different experience when you come in here and you go through it with a class, with my instruction, with the coach's instruction. Am I right? Yeah. Right? It's a lot different, right? Exactly. So, we call that you're preparing for not only the unknown, but the unknowable, right? No matter how much you think you know a workout, you come in here and it's still going to be different, okay? So definitely remember that. The unknown and the unknowable, okay? So across the whole spectrum of any sport, any game, any physical activity, right, there's one thing that kind of rings true, and that is capacity, okay? Capacity lends itself well to all sports, no matter what the demand is for. So in a sense, the program that we do, the specialty of the program is not specializing. Does that make sense? Okay. So you guys can look in your notes if you know this, if you don't. Can anybody tell me what the prescription of CrossFit is? It is, I wear a CrossFit t-shirt, it says it right on the front. I wear it every once in a while, right? So, like I said, you'll end up saying this a lot, right? Constantly varied, high intensity, functional movements. Okay, I'm gonna say that one more time. Constantly varied, high intensity, functional movements, okay? That's the prescription, right? That is what we do on a daily basis. Obviously, sometimes we work a little bit more in strength. Yesterday was completely a strength day, okay? Constantly varied, right? A lot of times you come in here, you're gonna, have a skill, have a warm-up, have a skill, and then have a Metcon. And that Metcon should be performed at a high intensity, right? We'll get into some of those different varying factors. So functional movements, they are universal motor recruitment patterns, okay? Universal motor recruitment patterns. They are performed in a wave of contraction from core to extremity. Literally everything that we do can be broken down into what's my core doing. Whether it's a squat, whether it's a sit-up, a push-up, a push press, a pull-up, right? All of those movements have their origins in the core, okay? So core to extremity. If there is, as coaches, if there's a problem, that's usually where we start, right? We ask people, what is your core doing? Most of the time the answer is, I have no freaking clue, right? So totally okay. Start with the core, then we move out, right? The movements are always compound movements, okay? Compound movements, multi-joint movements. They are, for the most part, natural, okay? Again, we get people that come in here and they look unnatural because they've spent a lifetime not doing these movements. But at its essence, these movements are natural. They are effective and efficient locomotors of the body and external objects, which is why we lift weights, right? External objects, being a barbell, being a kettlebell, dumbbell, being another person, whatever it may be. So keep those things in mind, right? The most important aspect of a functional movement is exactly what I just said, right? No matter, the one thread that across all sports, all games, everything is capacity. So the most important thing here is capacity, right? The most important aspect of functional movements is capacity, because if we can do things and we can do them fast and we can do them quickly and we can do them with power, we can do a lot of things. So what is capacity? Plain and simple, capacity is to move large loads over long distances and do so quickly. You will start telling people that, right? Because what ends up happening, right? A large load for a new person is going to be like 35 pounds, maybe even less than that, right? And when they can move that, load long distances, meaning from 1 rep to 100 reps, or for a long period of time, right? And they can do so quickly. They now have gained capacity. They now are able to ultimately do, they can go up in weights. They can do more. The 3 attributes to that are super important, right? Load, distance, and speed. If you think about like warm-ups, if you think about skill work, right? A lot of skill work, even if it's body weight, it's still under load. A push-up, a handstand push-up, a pull-up, a squat, right? You add weight to a squat, a push press, right? Simple movements. We add load to them so that we can, ultimately do, have more capacity. Distance, right? So, and it's not always distance. You can use distance as a pull-up, like we talked about. A pull-up, a regular pull-up is chin over the bar, right? A chest to bar, a little bit lower. That's more distance, right? A muscle-up, that's a much further distance that you have to pull yourself into that position, right? So distance doesn't mean just 10 meters opposed to 20 in running, right? Or distance on a rower. It can mean the difference between a quarter squat and a full depth squat. Okay, so if we can do a full depth squat with 135 pounds on our back, do 50 reps for time, right? If we can do that, but if we can do a full depth, we would obviously be able to do a quarter squat much faster. So distance is important, and the last one would be your speed. All 3 of these attributes uniquely qualify functional movements for the production of high power, right? So intensity is defined exactly as power. Okay, so before I get into another example, pretty much already just used the example, but just to clarify that, intensity is the independent variable most commonly associated with maximizing the rate of return of favorable adaptation to exercise. So to further my explanation of that, right? Think of a strict pull-up versus a butterfly pull-up. One set, maximum reps, right? So the load, distance, and speed are the load and the distance are the same, right? The load is your body weight. The distance is a pull-up, so chin over the bar, right? The speed is what varies, okay? Because a strict pull-up, you are using less speed, so therefore your rate of return is going to be less. Meaning you're going to do less strict pull-ups than you are butterfly pull-ups, simply because of the movement, right? The movement, the butterfly pull-up adds speed to it, so ultimately you can do more in less amount of time. So the intensity at which you do a strict pull-up as opposed to a butterfly pull-up, the intensity is the independent variable, okay? So, yeah, and you can do that with a lot of movements, right? Most of the time, if you can do a strict 200-pound back squat, meaning you can go down nice and slow and maybe even pause for a second, that's not necessarily representative of a true 1 rep max. If you can add weight to that and add weight to that, you would add load, right? The distance would still remain the same, but the speed would change. You should be able to ultimately do more weight in that back squat if you add speed to it. So same thing in a bench press, right? If you go and do slow controlled contractions on a bench press, right, that's not a true representation of a 1 rep max because you haven't introduced the aspect of speed into that. So, and then the almighty snatch, right? If we can pull a weight over our head, that's great. But if we can incorporate certain degrees of of power and speed, right, we're going to get the most out of the maximum load out of a snatch, right? Think of how much can you power snatch versus how much can you squat snatch. If you can squat snatch, right? There should be a difference in load there. I'd use myself as an example. So, any questions on that? Good. So the prescription for functionality and intensity would be, anybody? Constantly, what? Varied. Constantly varied, right? So, the movements are functional in their nature, right? The intensity at which we do the movements, right? So constantly varied, high intensity, functional movements. The prescription for that is to constantly vary those movements, okay? If we came in here and ran all the time, and that's all we did, right? We would get pretty good at running, but we would get really bad at everything else. So that's why we constantly vary these movements. So we believe that preparation for random physical challenges, i.e. the unknown and the unknowable events, is at odds with a fixed, predictable, and routine regimen. So everybody kind of understands that, right? Fixed, routine regimen. Think of going to, like a Lifetime Fitness or an LA Fitness, doing your bicep curls, doing your leg extensions, and then hopping on a treadmill for 20, 30 minutes, right? And doing that 3 times a week. That's what most people tend to do. The methodology. The CrossFit methodology is entirely empirical. Basically what that means is meaningful statements about safety, efficiency, and efficacy, okay? The 3 most important and interdependent facets to evaluate any fitness program. We also add in, we support that with measurable, observable, and repeatable data, okay? So the first thing that you come when you learn, when you come in here, right? You learn, you learn the movements, you learn to do the movements properly and safely, right? Efficiently and safely. And then from there, what do? We track our workouts, right? We measure our workouts. We observe our workouts. That's why we have coaches. The coaches are watching you, pushing you to get better. Today's snatch day. I constantly told people, your form is good. You have to add weight so that I can see where your form is going to fall apart, basically. And then repeatable, right? We this is our 2nd snatch day this week. Oh my God, we snatched twice this week. And we record all that, and then we're able to watch our progress as we do this. This is called, it's pretty obvious, evidence-based fitness, right? That's why we track everything. That's why we have performance history on these things. And at its core, it's empirically driven, clinically tested, and community developed, right? We work out in a group, and we have a lot of fun with that. The implementation. I'm sure you've heard of this. CrossFit is the sport of fitness, okay? We talked about specializing by not specializing. So, Brittany likes to rock climb. you like to play squash. I like to do any number of things, right? And by having this type of training program, we're able to do those things at a relatively high level. I'm not saying we're all going to go professional, and I don't know about you, but I don't know where you're at. I know you're ranked in the world or whatever you were, but again, that's a possibility. You do this so that you can play squash and enjoy that. What's that?
Improving the other sport that you love.
Exactly. And think of your class, the class setup. Harnessing in the implementation, we harness the natural camaraderie and competition and fun of the sport or game that yields an intensity that cannot be matched by others. So, for example, somebody comes in here and they can't explain why they like to come in here, right? It's because of the implementation. Because we've set it up, like our workouts are set up like a team, right? Where every class is set up like a team. They're gonna come in here. They're gonna get a good workout. They're gonna be working towards something, right? They're gonna have support through the coaches and the other members, and it's basically exactly what you would do if you had a team that you were training with, right? So we use whiteboards instead of scoreboards, right? Every time we do a lift or we complete a round, we don't have a scoreboard that gives us a couple of points, right? We use the whiteboard. We do rounds, reps, weights, distance, whatever the measure may be. Keep accurate records. We have a running clock, right? So a lot of times the workouts are timed, and one of the most important things we have to do as coaches is Lilo, really? One of the most important things we have to do as coaches is precisely define the rules and standards for the performance. Think of every day. People ask me questions. Hey, do both feet have to touch my box on a box over? Yesterday. What's the standard for a burpee? What's the standard for the wall ball? What's the standard for fill in the blank? Right? They're constantly coming and asking the coach because these are the rules that define the workout. Okay, so sometimes we have all kinds of rules. Sometimes we have really specific rules. You can't drop a medicine ball. Whatever it may be. And then sometimes we're a little lax on the rules. It's get after it, lock out, all that fun stuff, all the normal stuff. We not only motivate unprecedented output and derive both relative and absolute metrics at every workout, this data has important value beyond motivation, okay? So what that means is, there's a lot more going on here than just working out, and that's why we have things like, our little goal board over here, that, there's people's lives, that lives are being enriched by coming to the gym, and they're able to get out and do other things. I think of Sam and Annie, right? They're in New Zealand, and what they're talking about hiking mountains and doing all these crazy things. What they're not talking about is how sore and miserable they're gonna be, right? Because it's gonna be easy for them. They've prepared themselves for that, right? The adaptation, okay? Another really important thing for us to remember is CrossFit increases work capacity across broad time and modal domain, okay? Broad time and modal domain. So what that means is if it's a 3-minute workout, if it's a 30-minute workout, if it's modal domain, the implements that we use, if it's body weight, if it's barbells, kettlebells, whatever it is, whatever we're doing, our capacity, we're going to be able to do it. We're going to still be able to move a load across far distances and do so, at high intensity. Does that make sense? Super important to remember that. You should probably say that once or twice. And in this way, this supports the initial aim, the very first thing that we talked about, to build a broad and general and inclusive fitness program. obviously, the whole umbrella of sports, you know, what I don't think a lot of people understand is if you have somebody that plays volleyball, they will get better if they come in here, right? If you have somebody that plays football, baseball, any sport, the one, like I said, the one thread that kind of weaves throughout when it comes to sport is capacity. So I realize that a baseball pitcher does not need to have a high endurance capacity, but to throw a baseball, but he still needs strength, speed, power, accuracy, all those 10 physical skills, right? So again, maybe they don't have to run as hard or row as hard, but still being able to lift weights and do so efficiently is going to help them become a better athlete. Okay? So some of the things, like other measures. So for us, the holy grail of performance is capacity. So, if you have everybody do push-ups, sit-ups, and air squats, you're going to find out real quick who's the best athletes, because it's going to be the person that can do the most amount of push-ups, the most amount of air squats, the most amount of sit-ups in a determined amount of time. That doesn't mean that you need to neglect other things. We don't have these here, but we could test our VO2 max, for example, the beep test, right? That's a measure of the VO2 max. A lactate threshold. So if we were to put 95 pounds on the bar and see how many times you could squat it till you absolutely fell over, right? That would be a measure of lactate threshold. Body composition, which we've all probably done, right? Done we measure the body weight and do our body fat mass, and even strength and flexibility. All of these are correlates to that one big letter C word, which is capacity. Okay? So meaning you wouldn't trade a higher VO2 or a lower body mass for the ability to have a higher capacity in your workouts, right? So capacity kind of rules in this environment. So we've taken high intensity and constantly varied functional movements, distilled loads, range of motion, exercise, power, work, line of action, flexibility, speed, and all pertinent metabolics to a single value. Okay? Can anybody tell me what that value is for the most part? It's the one constant in every single workout. What do we always do? Give you a hint, it's right behind me.
Time.
What'd you say?
Time.
Exactly. We're always on the clock, right? So even when we're not on the clock, we can still kind of be like in weightlifting. A lot of times we're not really on the clock, but if we do multiple reps, if it takes you, if you do 2 reps and it takes you 15 minutes in between 2 reps, right? Technically, that's 2 sets of 1 rep at a particular weight, right? But we usually measure it by time, okay? So, very important to keep that in mind. All right. So, moving on to the foundations, right? The last few little explanations here. The program, the fitness program, is a core strength and conditioning program, right? It is not specialized. It is not a specialized fitness program, but a deliberate attempt to optimize physical competence in each of the 10 recognized fitness domains. So, fitness domains. There are 10 of them. Does anybody know them? Let's take a guess. Take a wild guess, right? Anything, just blurt it out. Anything at all?
Flexibility.
Flexibility's one.
Strength.
Strength is a big one.
Speed.
Speed, yes.
The cardio part.
Cardiovascular and respiratory endurance. So we're going to go as cardio for sure. We know what that means, right? Yep. Anything else? Let's see. We've got 4. We need 6 more. Mm-hmm.
Power.
Yep. I was gonna say, are you cheating and looking?
No, I'm not.
You can. Totally can. Totally can if you need to.
I'm just thinking that what we need.
Now we're gonna get into a little bit harder ones, right? So, write some of these in.
Stamina. Yeah.
Accuracy. Can anybody tell me? I used the example of a pitcher earlier, right? Pitchers are really strong people, right? Do you know how hard it is to do a pitcher's job, right? You have to be super accurate. So, in here, think of what's a good example of accuracy here. Perfect example, right? A wall ball shot. You have to be accurate. You have to hit a specific target, or it doesn't count, right? We worked on that in our warm-up yesterday. So accuracy, that's hitting a desired target in a wall ball. That would be another example of accuracy. Another A here, kind of obvious. Agility, right? Being able to move forward and backwards, left and right, and being able to do so under control, correct?
Skills include skills.
What's that?
Skills.
We're kind of defining those skills rather than just saying putting them under the umbrella of skills, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So another one is balance, right? If we don't have balance, for example, again, using the snatch from this morning, everybody, when they put the weight overhead, if they were looking down or up or around, that weight was moving around. And a lot of people do that, and they don't even realize they do it. And what I tell them is I say, focus, find a spot on the wall, and stare at that spot the whole time. And when they do so, they can put that weight overhead, staring at that target, and they're okay, right? And that's kind of another form of balance, right? Gymnastics, right? The balance beam, that's just a whole nother level. But again, when we put weights over our head, when we are a power clean, right? Sometimes that weight goes forward and we go forward too. We have to be balanced to be able to catch that weight on our shoulders. And this one, coordination, pretty obvious, right? We've got to be coordinated. Think of double unders, right? We talk a lot about rhythm with that. There's a lot of coordination. You're jumping, right? You're jumping high and you're jumping for long periods, and you're also spinning a rope under your feet, multiple times sometimes. I was just making sure. So those are the 10 recognized fitness domains, okay? So really important to remember those. At one point in time, I think I put them in order, like A, B, C, C, any way that you can remember them. If you say them enough, you'll kind of just be able to count them on your hands. Again, accuracy, it kind of gets lost in the shuffle, I think. When we talk about things like doing the speed ladder and stuff, a lot of those neurological skills come into play a little bit. So, we don't always talk about them, but it is important to remember them. Again, kind of going back to the program, what the program seeks, it seeks to be distinctive. So focusing on maximum neuroendocrine response, developing power, cross-training with multiple modalities, constant training and practice with functional movements, and the development of successful diet strategies, right? I think if you were to sum up what we do, that would probably be a pretty good sentence right there. So we talked a little bit about capacity. One thing that we have not mentioned are, we do any number of, physical activities, right? Running, swimming, biking, rowing, short distances, long distances, middle distances. At some point, this guarantees you exposure to, all of the 3 metabolic pathways, okay? So if you don't know what those 3 metabolic pathways are, you have the glycoptic, which give or take, 60 seconds to under like 2 minutes roughly. Then you have what's called the lactate threshold, usually, between 3 and 7 minutes, somewhere around there. And then you have what's called the oxidative, which is long distance, right? Oxidative oxygen. So you're able to do a physical activity for a long period of time because you're able to supply oxygen to your muscles. And think of workouts. And sometimes in a workout you're gonna hit all 3 of those pathways. It happens probably a lot more than you think, especially when we have like a really short workout. So you're gonna go out of the gate pretty hot, you're gonna slow down, and then you're gonna kind of settle in a little bit there. So kind of an example of that and an explanation is for every long distance that we do, so think of the last time that we ran 3 miles or a 5K or something like that. We're gonna do, or even ran a long distance in here. You're gonna do roughly, for every long distance, you're gonna do about 5 or 6 shorter distances. Does anybody know why that is? That's not wrong, right? That's not wrong. If you, again, I'm going to give you kind of some points to really think about. But yeah, constantly, a high intensity, constantly it gives you exposure, exactly what I just said, right? So think of like a really short workout. And something that you overestimate and you go hot out of the gate, right? You're gonna get that glycoptic pathway, right? You're gonna go and then burn out, right? And if it's something like a Fran, for some people, they're going to slow down and they're gonna hold onto the bar and they're gonna really feel that burn, right? That's that lactate shuffle or lactate threshold. And if it takes you longer than a couple of minutes to finish a Fran, right? At some point in time, you're going to basically slow down so that your body can get oxygen to the muscles, and you're going to then finish the workout. And then as we get better, as we get a better capacity, that workout becomes more and more and more glycoptic, right? And that oxidative process just kind of falls away. Again, if we did 100 pull-ups and then 100 thrusters, right? That workout is probably going to be more of a lactate threshold oxidative workout, because you're going to have 100 reps, you're going to break them up, right? However you're going to break them up, and it's going to take a certain amount of time to get that done. So the technical explanation here is compound or functional movement and high intensity or anaerobic cardio is radically more effective at eliciting nearly any desired fitness result. Okay, I want to say that last part, anaerobic cardio, right? So that means anaerobic means without oxygen. So high intensity without oxygen is radically more effective at eliciting nearly any desired fitness response. Okay, that is why we have people that come in here and when they come in here and they say, hey, I want to do a half marathon. I'm like, great, come into do the program. They're like, how much should I run? I'm like, no, do the program, right? Because if they can come in here and follow the program, running 13 miles in a day, if they're not trying to hit a specific time, they just want to finish, right? They're going to finish, and they're probably going to finish a lot better than they would if they just logged a bunch of miles. Like, sure, yeah, you're going to get better at running, but when you're doing, when you're doing what is prescribed here, you will be much more prepared, not only to finish that race, but to feel good afterwards. I mean, yeah, you run 13 miles, you're probably going to be sore for a day or two, but if that's all you're doing is running, right? You're going to get good at it. Your overall health is not going to be that much better. So that's why we do what we do, right? I was an endurance athlete, and I get it. Like, I ran all the time, and I hated it, and I thought that I had to do it. I wish when I was in college and in high school that I had CrossFit, because I would have been doing it all the time, right? And maybe I would have been a little bit better of an athlete. Anyways, so unfortunately, this is not a matter of opinion either. This is scientific fact. meaning like you can look up any journal that has to do with metabolics in general, and they'll tell you the same thing. And yet it's it's marginally effective. The marginally effective old ways persist and are nearly universal. So when most people say, hey, I'm going to run a half marathon, what do they start doing? They start running, and run only. And unfortunately, I'm not saying that they're setting themselves up for failure, because most likely they'll still be able to finish a marathon, having logged a bunch of miles. But when it comes to the 10 physical skills, right, really the only one that they worked on is going to be their cardio. Okay, that's why, you know, when it comes to like dissecting our program, why it works so well is because we're not in any given workout, we're working on all kinds of these domains. So just to kind of break that down, gymnastics, whether it's rudimentary, like, you know, a hollow body position, a sit-up, or advanced, garnering a great capacity. Gymnastics garners a great capacity at controlling both the body dynamically, think of that butterfly pull-up, and statically, think of a strict pull-up, right? While maximizing strength to weight ratio. And gymnastics, everybody in gymnastics is always super flexible, right? Bastards. So also when it comes to Olympic weightlifting, so why essentially we do Olympic weightlifting. The sport has a unique ability to develop an athlete's explosive power for obvious reasons, right? You know, explosive power, controlling external objects. You are picking a heavy weight, sometimes, you know, your body weight, 2 times, 3 times your body weight objects, and you're able to master critical motor recruitment patterns. Okay, so think of how foreign like a snatch and a clean and jerk is to you when you first started, right? I remember when I first started, I didn't understand a clean at all. I was doing the reverse curl and this funky press thing. But over time, those motor recruitment patterns, right? So getting the bar into the hips and incorporating the legs into that hip drive and getting underneath the bar and all of that, you know, you get better at it. And that's why we say, whether it's double unders or, you know, Olympic lifts, you have to practice them. I'm not saying that you have to always practice them at super heavy weights, but you have to practice them to understand what muscle groups you're using, and practice, you practice a deadlift to get better at, a clean. You practice, you practice clean pulls and other different things. Overhead squats to get better at a snatch, right? And there's all kinds of different ways that we can go about that. And the cool thing about that, why we incorporate things like gymnastics and Olympic weightlifting is, once you have a certain level of fitness, I think that both of you would agree, whatever it is, you can go out into the world. And I say this all the time, right? What are Sam and Annie doing right now? They're expressing their fitness by traveling and experiencing the world, right? And we want everybody to do that. I mean, some days in the summertime, we're like, hey, screw this, let's go on a run, or let's go to the park, or let's go wherever, right? Let's go to Hoover, what'd you say?
Biking.
Let's go biking, yeah. Let's go, to the obstacle course, right?
Let's go climb a wall.
And let's go climb up a wall, okay? So almost there, guys. Just a little bit more here. Just a little bit more. So why this is an effective approach. So I'm just going to kind of read this because I know myself, I fell into this category for a majority of my life. And I think back on all that and I'm like, man, I felt like I was wasting my time. But compared to what I do now, because I did it to such a degree that it was really hard and really boring. Okay, and I didn't really have any reason other than I thought that's what the answer was, to be physically fit, and that is, in gyms and health clubs throughout the world, the typical workout consists of isolation movements and extended aerobic sessions, right? The fitness community, from trainers to fitness magazines, has the exercising public believing that lateral raises, curls and leg extensions and sit-ups and the like are combined with a 20 to 40 minute stint on a stationary bike or treadmill are going to lead to some great, athleticism, some great fitness, right? What we do here is all about compound movements, okay? Shorter, high-intensity cardio sessions. We've replaced the lateral raise with the push press, right? And so instead of going in front, we're going overhead. We've replaced the bicep curl with the pull-up, right? So if you want to work on your biceps, turn your wrist around, right? Incorporate those biceps into that, And the leg extension, instead of sitting on a machine that is not designed for your specific body type, right? What do? We squat. This is our machine, and it is designed for us to squat, right? We just have to make sure that we learn to do it properly. So the cool thing about this is, I don't know if any of you have ever had any exposure to, for example, professional athletes, right? You would go in there. The cool thing about us is we're pretty experienced at what we do. You would go in there and you would be able to describe what the Ohio State football team is doing, right? You're like, oh crap, those guys are squatting a lot of weight. It looks like they're doing this type of program, right? You could sit there and watch. They're doing heavy sets of 5 on a back squat, and then they're doing their bench press, and then they're doing this, and then some speed and agility work on ladders and stuff like that. You wouldn't be in there like freaking out. If you're used to leg extensions and bicep curls, you would go into that environment and be like, what in the hell is everybody doing here, right? You would go in there and be pretty versed in what they were doing. You might not know exactly what they're doing, but the movements would be pretty familiar. And the cool thing about that is because those are high level athletes, right? And high level coaches. And we do those same things in here. Not saying that we're trying to turn you all into football players or Olympic athletes, but the only thing that differs between them and you is the degree at which they're lifting. So I'm not going to have you guys squatting 500 pounds, right? So we squat based on our performances, but we all get the same out of it, right? So having said that, the last thing that I'm gonna go over here is make sure that on your little thing that you have, right? So make sure that you guys read through the rest of this. Where's the very first page? Yeah, let's see that. So right through here, it says methodology. Just make sure you read all through that. You can see I kind of followed understanding CrossFit, the foundations, so on. Try to read through, I think, does that say 44?
Yeah.
Try to read through page 1 through 44 before the next time that we meet, because the next time, I broke this up into basically 2 sessions-ish. We're going to talk about what is a core strength and conditioning program, and then we're going to talk about what is fitness, right? A little bit more in depth on what we went over here. So make sure you you read all through that for the next time as well. Do you guys have any questions? Go over these things, be able to speak to some of these things that we talked about, some of the things that I mentioned were important that I wrote on the board. And yes, I'm totally...
In a real classes, when we go, they get the exam of this, understanding these things.
Multiple choice.
So it's
Yeah.
not all about it.
So my test is going to be a lot harder.
Yeah.
And if you fail, you will have to take it again until you pass. And there will be burpees and other penalties.